I bought a vacation mobile home almost 2 months ago. It's a complete shack, 2 small bedrooms, a little living room, kitchen, and 1 bathroom. It's simply meant as a nice, peaceful place to come to escape the city, either by myself or with my girlfriend, if I ever get one. The property has 2 acres, so it's nice and roomy too. And one of the main appeals is that it's only a 10-minute drive from a mountain that I like to go snowboarding at a few times a year. My first time there, I was decorating the place with my family. We all went to one of the local furniture outlets in the area and picked out a few couches. We actually banged this all out in one weekend, and thank God for my dad's pickup truck, which made transporting all this stuff easy. During all this back and forth from store to mobile home, I guess the closest neighbor noticed all the commotion, and he came over to greet us. He introduced himself as Dale. He was, I guess, what you'd expect from a local here. He had a thick Hudson Valley accent, and his dialect and mannerisms were obviously different than, I guess, us city folk are used to. Nevertheless, he seemed nice at first. We all introduced ourselves, though I knew I'd really be the one needing to get to know him since this was my property. After chatting with him for a while, we tried to resume unloading and bringing furniture into the home. He lingered for a while just watching us. My dad tried to converse more with him here and there. Eventually, though, Dale said goodbye and walked back up the road to his home. We left Sunday together, and the next time I went up there was 2 weeks later. I went alone this time just to bring more stuff up, like my snowboarding gear, and set up the Wi-Fi. I guess Dale saw my car pass by, because soon after I got there, he knocked on the open door and stepped inside and said hello. I gave him a smile and told him to come in, which he already was. He told me the place was looking nice already. Then after some small talk, he invited me over for a beer. I said why not, and followed him up the road to his home, which is also a mobile home, maybe a little bigger than mine. We then sat outside on his deck. He grabbed me a Heineken from inside and sat across from me at the table. So I tried to get to know him. I started by asking how long he's been there. He answered with 20 years too long. I asked a few more questions, and he had some similar, pessimistic yet somewhat joking responses. This kind of set the tone for the rest of the conversation. So he started asking me questions, like what brought me here, where exactly I was from, etc. All the questions he didn't ask us 2 weeks earlier. I told him I'm from Queens, and that I wanted a place to escape and to snowboard. I guess he didn't like my answer, I don't think. He started ranting about how us city folk are coming in and ruining shit, polluting the place and littering everywhere. This turned into somewhat of a debate, where I was trying to defend myself and other so-called city folk. I considered it a little debate, until I saw how heated he was getting, and he started to actually raise his voice in his thick accent, with his half-drank beer in his hand. This spiraled so out of control that at one point he said word for word, "I don't know why y'all can't just stay where the fuck you belong." I stood up and with a smile on my face said, "Okay, I think I'm gonna head back now, thank you for the beer." He didn't say anything, he just looked down at his beer as I walked away. As I was like 100 feet away from his home, he yelled out, "I'm sorry." I looked back at him and gave him a thumbs up. At the same time, I was horrified that that's gonna be my neighbor here. 20 years alone must have him losing his mind, and maybe he doesn't know how to deal with people anymore. That was the excuse I chalked up for him. But that night, while I was laying on the mattress I had on the floor, watching a movie on my laptop, I heard a voice from outside. It sounded like someone talking to themselves, cursing to themselves. I looked out the window, but I didn't see anyone out there. It was just simply too dark out. The property is big and it's mostly woods, so you could imagine how freaked out I was hearing a voice out there. The next day, Dale knocked on my door again around midday. I knew it was him because I heard him calling my name. I didn't want to deal with him again. I stayed in my room. He had to have kept knocking for 5 minutes, which in itself was weird. And at one point he said, "I know you're in there, your car is here." That freaked me out. The guy is clearly not normal by my standards, and he was already giving an early, weird, obsessive vibe. He finally left. Or did he? I continued on the rest of my day, almost uncomfortable to go outside in fear he was out there nearby watching to see if I was actually home and ignoring him. After dinner, I started watching another movie on the TV through my phone, and for the second night in a row, I heard a voice outside, even over the TV. I had to turn off the TV to look outside. Couldn't see anything, so I went out to the deck and flicked on the deck light. I saw Dale standing about 5 feet into the woods, arms flat at his sides for a second, before he could react to the light, and then he ran into the woods. I went back inside and considered calling 911. I called my dad, and long story short, he said hold off on doing that because once I call 911 on the neighbor here is the day I don't want to show my face here anymore. I tried to just sleep through the night, Tomorrow I'd leave and go home for a month. Within an hour of me laying on the mattress, I heard Dale outside screaming in an angry voice, "City piece of shit, I know you're in there. Leave, no one wants you here." He sounded like he was in a drunken fit of rage, but this was officially the moment I realized my neighbor there is a complete psychopath, and he may be the reason why I got this home at such a good price. I went home the next day, taking my valuables back home with me. I haven't been back there since, but you better believe the next time I go there, it'll be with my whole family. If he keeps it up, cops will be called. At this moment, I'm not really sure what to do, but I'm considering trying to sell this place if this keeps up, because at the moment, I'm actually scared to go up there alone. My family and I used to live in a rough neighborhood when I was 7. Even the neighbor on one side was a total creep and wasn't friendly at all. I don't personally remember much of this story because I was way too young, but my mom remembers it all too well. It was a regular night like any other, which makes this that much scarier. It was just my mom, my 2 siblings, and I at home. My dad was gone on a business trip, as he would be often. That night, around midnight, someone started knocking on our door. My mom woke up and went to the front door and asked who it was. No one answered. She thought that maybe it was some kids playing ding-dong ditch, so she went back to bed. About 30 minutes later, again, someone starts knocking. She gets up and peers through the side window to see if she can spot anyone out there, but nobody is there. In any other neighborhood, this would just be assumed to be annoying kids doing some night ding-dong ditching, but in this area, you could never assume anything but the worst. My mom started to worry, so she went back to her room and grabbed my dad's shotgun, and then she sat in the living room in the dark, waiting. During all of this, she never woke any of us up, as we were all little kids at the time and she didn't want to panic us. Again, while she was in the living room now, there was more knocking. She gets up to peer through the window again, expecting to see someone new, but still no one. My mom begins shouting at whoever it is that she's going to call the cops, and that if anyone tries to come in, she would shoot them. This threat, a legitimate threat mind you, apparently worked because that was the last of the knocking. At some time between then and the police showing up, my mom woke us just to be safe in the case that something bad happened. At about 2 in the morning, the police finally show up and do a quick search outside of our house while we waited inside. After their search, they come in and tell my mom that they had found a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet long next to the front door and asked if it belonged to my mom. She said it wasn't hers and asked why. The cop told her it belonged to whoever was knocking on the door, and that they were likely planning on strangling my mom with the barbed wire when she opened the door to see who was knocking. They said that she was very smart to not open the door to see who was there, otherwise it could have cost her her life. The cops said they'd patrol the neighborhood until morning, and do a thorough investigation once there was daylight. That morning, as they were searching around the house, they found footprints leading around to the back of the house leading to my bedroom window. They had also found nicks in the window sill where the person was trying to pry open the window to break in, but failed. My mom always suspected it was this one neighbor because on several occasions, she would catch him staring into our house at her through his curtains, and he was incredibly creepy and unfriendly all around. He also would be the first one to know when my dad wasn't home, since he knew what vehicle he drives. Not long after that, we moved out of that neighborhood, thank God. We had a new neighbor move in recently, which at first I was completely okay with because we never really got along with our old neighbors. But boy do I miss them now. So it was a few months back that we saw a new van in the driveway next door. No moving trucks or nothing though. We didn't see anyone moving in furniture or anything at all. It was kind of weird. To be friendly, my wife and I decided to go knock on the door to introduce ourselves, but no one opened the door, which was also weird because their car was in the driveway. We figured it wasn't a big deal. For all we knew, they were in the shower or sleeping or something. So our bedroom is upstairs, and at one of our windows we can see into the neighbor's backyard. The house next door has a detached garage in the backyard. The new neighbor's van wasn't in the driveway all day. Then, all of a sudden, when my wife and I were reading in bed, we heard the garage next door open up. Naturally, we were curious to look out the window and see if we could catch a peek at what the man looks like. We creased the blinds a bit to look out there. And there he was, this middle-aged looking guy in a white t-shirt and jeans. The motion light over his garage was on, so that's how we saw him. He was bringing boxes from his van into his garage. We stopped spying before it got weird. A few days passed, and his car wasn't in the driveway at all. until one night we heard his garage door open again. Every so often on this one night we would hear some weird scraping sounds coming from out in his garage, and then occasional bangs and such, probably from him dropping boxes in the garage. But what really did make sense was that metallic scraping sound that wouldn't stop. I went over to the window to look out again. This time he caught me staring. He looked up at my window, and I felt incredibly awkward. I walked away from the window, and seconds later, I heard him close the garage door. I told my wife I'm going to go out there and say hi. That's the only way I figured I could redeem the awkwardness I just created. I went outside in my shorts and t-shirt, and went over next door to the driveway, but the man was in his van with the engine running already, and I think when he saw me, he backed out of the driveway really fast. Then he disappeared down the street into the night. The whole thing was incredibly weird, and I was getting the vibe he was avoiding us now. I was a bit curious now what exactly was going on with all the scraping sounds by his garage. I walked into his backyard to the garage door, and something was making noise in there. I kept hearing thumping sounds. He had to have an animal in there or something. Then I heard my wife's voice call my name from our window, and she asked what the hell I was doing. I looked at her and put my finger to my lip. I tried to open his garage, but it was locked. That was enough snooping. I walked back to our house and back to bed. Later that night, I woke up to my wife shaking me, whispering that she heard our backyard gate open. I told her to stop messing with me because she was freaking me out, but she said she swears she heard it. I had to be the man of the house and go out there and look. First, I took a look out the window. The lights in the neighbor's yard were off, and our yard was too dark to see anything. I went downstairs and took a look out the front door. The neighbor's van was in the driveway. He was home. I went to the backyard now and turned on the lights. As I did, I heard someone running away to the side of the house. Then the backyard gate slammed shut. I was horrified, but I made myself angry and chased after them. I ran to the gate and then to the front of the house, then to the street. I was the only one out there, yet I felt as though I was being watched from any possible direction. I went back inside the house, told my wife that someone was indeed in the yard, but I didn't see them, and she asked me if I thought it was the neighbor. I told her I honestly don't know, but the next day, I went to the neighbor 2 doors down, Gene, and asked him if he had met the new guy yet. He said no, but that he'd keep being awoken to sounds late at night coming from his garage. I told him about how someone snuck into our yard the night before, and he found that equally freaky and weird. We agreed to text each other and go over together the next time we'd hear weird noises to finally meet this guy. So the next day was Saturday. As I was opening all the living room blinds in the morning, I saw that it was like the first or second time that the neighbor's car was in the driveway during the day. Then I looked at his house, at one of the windows. There he was, standing stiff as a statue, looking at me as if he were waiting for me to open the blinds. I expected him to look away, but we just locked eyes. Unbroken eye contact for a solid 20 seconds. I waved because I didn't know what else to do. When he didn't wave back or even crack half a smile, I started calling for my wife, and when I got her, I told her to look out the window, but by then he was no longer standing at the window. I said to hell with it at this point, and went next door again with my wife and knocked on the door and rang the bell. I felt knocking is a bit more assertive. I heard one loud slam from inside the house, but he never came to the door. This was the last straw. I went over to Gene's house again, and when he opened the door, he asked me if I saw his texts yet. I said no, and I also didn't have my phone on me, so he told me that last night he heard a muffled crying sound from outside, in the new guy's direction, and he texted me about it. Gene came out with me to knock on the neighbor's door one more time, and once again, no answer. We all by this point, including Gene's wife and my wife, knew something is seriously off here. The next day, the van was gone again, and it's been almost 2 weeks and the van hasn't returned. We don't know where he went. We don't know if or when he's coming back. These past few nights, either my wife or I wake up in the middle of the night thinking we hear noises outside, and when we go to the window to see if the van's in the driveway next door, it's not. It's crazy none of us even know the guy's name, and we're still trying to put the pieces together, because one night I heard something definitely alive in that garage making noises, and then another night, Gene heard what he thought to be a muffled crying. Obviously he'll most likely be back, but I don't think any of us are looking forward to it, and maybe for peace of mind, we should anonymously report him.